My name is Alina Sergachov. Today is April 25th, 2019, and thank you so much for meeting with me here in Appleton today.
You're quite welcome. Glad to have you.
My name is Derm Flynn. I am the retired mayor of the town of Appleton. I was mayor for 24 years, and I was mayor during 9/11 when all of the happenings took place, 9/11 and 9/12 beyond. And of course, it's carried on to this day with the musical and the documentary and the other things that are happening as a result of the after events of the tragedy of 9/11, because really that's what I guess all of the hype seems to be about right now.
And I'm Dianne Flynn. I always tell everybody I'm the better half of him. I also was quite involved with the events of, we call it 9/12, not 9/11. 9/11 is too tragic, and you'll never forget where you were. I guess we were in St. John's actually when we heard about it. Derm was in government meetings, and I guess somebody came into the room and whispered to the Premier, and all of a sudden their meeting's finished, and so then they found out. I was actually driving up Cammott Road looking for an electronics store, and this flash came on the radio. I said, holy crap, and I spotted the store I wanted to go to, and I ran in, and they had a big TV there, but it wasn't on, and it was kind of like in the show, so like, she said, Oz, turn on your radio. I said, turn on your TV, and turned it on just as the second plane was hitting, and it was like something you'll never forget.
And some years before, in another career I was in with tourism, I was in New York promoting Newfoundland and Labrador and promoting the communities, and I had the privilege of going to the World Trade Center and going to the restaurant, the Windows of the World restaurant at the top of one of the towers. And when we saw the live pictures of those towers coming down, it was just so unbelievable and so emotional, I guess, for me, because I had been there and had seen the size of those structures and had seen the number of people that worked there, and I was certainly of the opinion that there would be thousands upon thousands of people lose their lives when those towers collapsed. There were thousands of people, and of course we never should forget those people. And you know, the almost 2,800, I think, in total from various countries that lost their lives, both people that worked at the tower and people that responded, the first responders that went in to try to help, and you know, and the other people that lost their lives, I guess, at the other sites at the Pentagon and on the flight that got hijacked. And we will never forget those people, and we've actually got to meet some of those people that lost loved ones on that day. But really, I guess, for our own personal involvement, our activity started right after that day, when the 38 wide-bodied aircrafts were diverted to Gander, and many more to other parts of Newfoundland and Labrador, and to Canada itself. Where literally thousands of planes, I guess, were diverted. But the people that did the research on the happenings of 9/12, for the 5 or 6 days that those people were in our communities, for whatever reason, decide to select our area. I guess because of such a small area with such a small amount of accommodations. So that's, I guess, to some degree what made the story about the musical Come From Away and the documentary that is also getting great rave reviews of, called You Are Here. And more by chance than anything else, 10, 12 years later, after the events of 9/12 and people going away, I was one of the people selected to play a small role in those productions, and my wife was as well, and we have been blessed by that. But we were also blessed back 18 years ago to meet so many people from so many parts of the world, and you know, have them come to our town, and for us to be able to respond to their needs, give them a roof over their head, give them a meal,
A hug.
give them a warm hug and respect, and show them a little kindness at a time when they were all literally scared to death, I suppose. And we were no less scared to death, because I think a lot of people thought that there was a lot worse things to happen, and we could be into a third world war because of what was going on in just to the south of us, our neighbours to the south, which we have had close ties for infinity, forever and a day. We've always had close ties with the Americans, and we treat them as our neighbours. So we were able to step forward and put our best foot forward and try to offer some hospitality and some kindness to people that needed it. And you know, it was something that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and all of the communities that were represented in the musical, as well as many other communities in Newfoundland and Labrador and in Canada, showed the kindness and respect that you would accept, you would hope to get if you were diverted to some strange land or some strange location because of tragedies in your country.
And I guess our hospitality started even before. I mentioned earlier that we were in St. John's and he was in for government meetings, so we were staying at the hotel in St. John's, which was quite close to Mile 1, where they were bringing a lot of the people. And so once we got back to the hotel, we immediately went over to Mile 1 and said, like, okay, what can we do? You're going to need help. What can we do? And it's, no, we've got a list. So we went back to the hotel. He immediately got hold of our town hall down here and said, like, if there's that many planes and that many people, we know we're going to end up with people out at our town hall. So start calling around, get bedding, get food, get whatever people are going to need. And we said, now, the key to our house, our neighbour has the key to our house. There's nobody in it. Go up and unlock the door and tell anybody who needs a shower to come up and grab a shower. Show them where the towels are. And sure enough, we kind of made record time getting back from St. John's. I think we left probably around 4:30 in the morning. We were sitting there watching TV and saying, okay, this is stupid. What we're doing here is stupid. Plus they needed hotel rooms, so we said, that's enough of this. So we packed up and we headed home. I think we got here probably around 7:30. And there was actually people coming out of our house then after having a shower. So even before we landed, we had people at the house. And it just continued on from then.
We have a great volunteer base here in Appleton, as do most small towns around Newfoundland and Labrador. Volunteers are, I always call them the heart and the lifeblood of any community, especially small communities where very minimal staff operating at the town hall and that type of thing. So we depend so much on volunteers, and this goes for all of the communities. The one here in central Newfoundland, the Lewisporte, Norris Arm, Gambo, Glenwood, Gander, and of course Appleton. And all of the communities offered their services, and once Gander, all of the facilities filled up in Gander, we were all called on to take as many people as we could. And I mean, our school that we share with Glenwood, our sister town across the river, had over 600 people stay there. That was one of the largest gatherings of plain people, as we affectionately started calling them, because we didn't know what to call them, because they were all from different flights and everything else. So, and they were all from different countries, so we just couldn't call them all Americans, because there was lots of people from many countries. We had 14 nationalities represented at the town hall in Appleton, and we only had 100 people there. So you can imagine the number of different nationalities were at some other places where they had 400 and 500 people. So you know, it was just that everybody felt an urge and a desire to try to do something. The TV, local TV, and the local radio stations were calling out for people to offer up food and bedding and whatever. And of course, what happened here in Appleton is when we had we had a small crowd. It was I guess it's sort of an intimate setting where you can actually get to know people almost on a first name basis and get to talk to them about why they're traveling and their family and stuff like that. And most of the people here in Appleton, a lot of them are empty nesters, as we call them. Their kids are grown up and gone or whatever, and they've got extra rooms. And immediately as mayor, I started farming the people there. People were coming and saying, we don't need to have people sleeping on cots on the floor. We've got 2 bedrooms, or we've got 1 bedroom. And so we were farming out people constantly.
I guess, and at that point we hadn't even gotten cots at the town hall.
No, we were using blanketing and
air mattresses,
air mattress
whatever.
and that type of thing. So I mean, we started farming them out, and it was later on in the morning that I got a call from the headquarters in Gander from the centre where they had declared a state of emergency to say that, well, keep all of those people into one location because there was some rumors circulating that there may be some terrorists possibly on some of those aircrafts, because nobody knew it at that time. And, you know, so I said, well, it's a little late. We've got most of them already farmed out to homes, because we ourselves had already, I had offered rooms or accommodations to 3 people, and running around doing mayor duties, and I just offered them to 3 people that I met, and unbeknownst to me, Diane had offered 3 people accommodations as well. So when we both showed up here at the house,
with 6 people.
we had 6 people, and our house is just a small split entry bungalow, as most houses are in Appleton. But we managed to accommodate them all, and some of them became lifelong friends. They all became friends immediately. I mean, and a lot of the people that just stayed at the hall became friends for many years, and the contacts continued on for years afterwards. Cards and letters and boxes of chocolates and things like that to volunteers that the people had met. And you know, I mean, it was just those nice type of things, especially at Christmas time. We were getting Christmas cards from people and just thanking over and over again for our kindness, which we felt was something that we would all do. Supply a bowl of soup and a sandwich and, you know, a bed and a hug and whatever you had to offer, whatever you would, you know, and people were doing that all over the place. The volunteers were so
There's food
active.
coming in from everywhere. And it wasn't just the local people here from Appleton and Glenwood who were providing food. I mean, there was food coming in from Twillingate and Ladle Cove.
2 hours away.
Anywhere in the what we call the catchment area, people knew.
Anyone could hear it on the radio, and could hear that there was so many people being gathered in Gander, landing in Gander, and they needed accommodations and needed this and needed that. And I mean, people were bringing in all kinds of different things. And of course, the agencies, the Salvation Army and the Red Cross, as they normally do, step forward and do some wonderful work, and the fire departments, and I mean the church groups, and you know, everybody. It was an all-inclusive, everybody on deck and everybody up involved as much as you can. People were driving people around, and you know, like that was really the start of the whole 9/12 experience. And that was happening in Gander, in Big Way, at all of the schools and everywhere, and places like that. And it was happening in all of the communities around, because we were the closest places to keep people, so that everyone expected. Maybe a day or so later, the planes would be in the air and would be, all those people would be gone. I mean, and the people themselves expected that. So when people started to realize that they were safe, instead of, I mean, they were landing in a lot of them were landing in a place they didn't know existed, let alone know anything about. Some of them knew about Gander as a technical stop for flights to Europe and stuff like that, and some of people had made some connections to it in that way. But most people didn't know where they were, how long they were going to be there. They didn't know if their families knew. A lot of them didn't even know why the planes had landed until they managed to get in some location and got in front of a TV. And even then, some of them were thinking that they were looking at a bad movie or something. It was just those types of reactions from people. So once all of those people found out that they were on the ground and they were safe.
Once they got to make contact with their own families.
Yes, absolutely.
To let them know they were safe and they were going to be looked after. They had somewhere to sleep. They had something to eat. They had somebody to talk to, which was really important to them also. Because I mean, they came in and they saw TV and they saw what was happening, and I mean, total shock to them, total shock to us. So they wanted to talk to themselves, to us, wanted somebody to listen to them about the worries. In fact, one of the people who has become a really good friend of ours had a sister who would normally have been in the Twin Towers, and it took him probably about 5 or 6 hours before he finally got a hold to her and knew that she was safe. And he's become a really good friend of ours. And the funny story about him is that he was actually he was a state trooper. George Vitale is his name, actually. And he was Governor Pataki's special agent. And he had been on an advance trip to Ireland because Governor Pataki was supposed to be going over there for a visit. So he was going over to do the scouting, of course, and ended up here. And of course, then in New York, all the important people got put down into what they called the bunker to make sure that they were safe. And so George would call to find out what was going on in New York. And when they'd answer at the other end, the governor would answer, he'd always say, "I'm calling from heaven on earth," is what he'd say. So.
Yeah, and people were, once they got comfortable and got themselves settled away, as Diane was saying, we had people taking their people out in their boats on the river. People, they used to go down to the waterfront there, and people would just go out in the boats, and there was people on quads going off up to somebody's cabin or in the country for short visits and that type of thing. Of course,
lending people their cars.
Everybody, and people were offering people their cars to drive back into Gander, to go to Walmart or go to Shoppers or go to wherever they wanted to go and that type of thing, or taking them there because most people, strangers, wouldn't take the cars, even though they were being offered cars. And it was a story that somebody said, "No, I don't want to take your car. I don't want to take your car." And whoever offered him the car said, "Yeah, go ahead and take the car." And he said, "You're giving me a stranger your car." And the guy said to him, he said, "Well, don't worry." He said, "You're on an island here, so you're not going to get off the island with my car if you decide to make a run for it." So, that type of thing was happening more often than not, and people were being offered rides and taken all over the place, and some people were taking sightseeing trips out to this place and that place, the other communities, and some people knew that they had friends from their flight in Gander and they wanted to make connection with them, and people were being driven around and taken care of in every way possible. Given that there were so many people around. And the weather was absolutely spectacular in September for Newfoundland, which is highly unusual to get that kind of real nice weather for 5 or 6 days. And that made everything so much easier because people could get out and walk and get their private space and that type of thing. And a lot of people in Appleton used to go down by the river, sit under rocks and just reflect, and you'd see some people down there, they'd be crying, or they'd be praying, or they'd be just sitting there relaxing and watching the quiet and peace of a little town after coming from New York or some of the big cities in the US or in Europe where quiet is not a word in the vocabulary of big cities and that type of thing. The city never sleeps in big cities, but you know, you could go down there and get that kind of quiet and space, so that you could sort of actually think about what you had seen on TV and what was going on and what the ramifications might be of what was going on, because everybody was on edge about where this was all going to lead. So, I mean, it was, I know that when the people went, of course I was trying to be active and do my mayor's duties, and Dianne was volunteering at the town hall, and of course, and cooking and that type of thing, and we were running back and forth, and every time that I'd get up here to leave the house, the 6 people we had here would all get up and say, well, we're going. And I used to say, no, you're not coming with me, I've got things to do. And I'd say, go downstairs and watch TV, or go down and call on the phone, or do whatever. And that was happening in households all around this whole area. It wasn't just one of the things that we did, it was things that everybody that had rooms that offered them, and you know, and people were able to get, you know, I mean, sleeping in a cot in a gymnasium with you know, 500 or 600 people around you, it doesn't give you much privacy, and so I mean, people were sort of anxious to get were willing to move. Some people just wanted to stay with the group because they all felt that they would be leaving so soon. You know, they were expecting to be leaving any hour and waiting for that phone call or the bus to pick them up, but of course it ended up being day 1, day 2, day 3, stretching into 5 and 6 days in some cases.
It was a really busy time for all of us, and like I said, did more between being at the town hall and then coming home and washing towels and doing laundry. And in fact, well, Bob, who's in the show, has become a really good friend of ours, Tom McKeon. And he's the fellow who was afraid of his wallet. But anyway, he wasn't afraid of his wallet after day 1 or day 2. And I said he's become really, really good friends of ours. But the people were amazed that we would leave strangers, people that we had just met, would leave them alone in the house. No, like, that wouldn't happen where we are. We like, you don't know us. You don't know what are you going to do? You know, again, as Derm said, you are on an island. We will find you. You know, so it was, but it was busy. I mean, we didn't have time to think really.
And when everything was over and everyone was leaving, it was, you know, everybody was melancholy. I mean, we had become close friends with a whole bunch of those people in a very short period of time, because they were there all the time, and we were there all the time. You were living, sleeping with them, and living with them, and eating with them, and talking with them, and so all of a sudden, you know, I mean, you had developed personal friendships, and I think, you know, Mayor Claude Elliott from Gander says it well. He says, you know, at first when we had close to 7,000 strangers show up in town, drop out of the sky, and landed on our doorsteps. You know, they came as strangers. 2 or 3 days later, they became good friends. And by the time they were ready to leave, they were almost like family. In fact, some of them spent more time with us than family members do, because their family is all over the place, and you see them once a month, or you see them twice a year, or whatever. But we had people like that for 5 or 6 days. And that was all over. And everybody, you know, all of a sudden, the planes were in the air, and the airspace was opened up, and everybody was on the move and leaving. And you know, it created a whole empty feeling, but for the most part, everybody that was involved started to go back to their own lives and do their own thing, or back to work, or back to their other volunteer work, or their church work, or whatever the things they were involved in. And really, until every year in Appleton, after 9/11, on the first year after, the plane people had passed an envelope around in our town and collected up almost $5,000, and they said do something for the kids. We managed to, I talked to my recreation committee at the time and my winter festival committee, and met with some government agencies, and I managed to raised some extra bucks, about $150,000 in total, and we built the park, which a part of the park was a playground for the kids. So that was to go with the wishes of the plain people who had donated the initial seed money. Of course, $5,000 can't build a whole park, so we had to raise the extra money for that. But on the first anniversary, we opened the park, had a beautiful monument put in the park, and at some point in time in the future, we managed to get a piece of steel from the Twin Towers. But that was all done, and every year since 9/11, we've had a service in the park to commemorate the tragedy of that event, but also to recognize the efforts of our volunteers who were active at that time, were active long before 9/11, were active very active during 9/11, and still to this day are very active in our community. And all the communities that I mentioned earlier, they're the lifeblood of all the communities. So that was done, and we just moved on with everyone moved on with their lives and doing their usual things. And then all of a sudden, at some point in time on the 10th anniversary, David Hein and Irene Sankoff, two young writers from Toronto, showed up to
They
start
looked like they
doing
should have
research.
still been in high school.
They looked like, yeah, they looked like they should have been still in high school, but they were here, and you know, they came to research for the musical Come From Away, which everyone thought was kind of strange to talk about a musical, about the whole thing, but anyhow, that's what they did. But I should backtrack a little bit, because before even that, back on around the first anniversary, a gentleman by the name of Jim DeFeedy came from Miami to do research for a book, The Day the World Came to Town, which has been a best-selling book, and again interviewed people like some to read like you're doing yourself, and like the writers for Come From Away did, to talk about stories of, and of course the stories right at the first year were much more vivid in people's minds. And Jim had all kinds of, he could have probably wrote 10 books with the amount of material that he had, but he wrote a great little book called, you know, The Day the World Came to Town, which really explained again about the central Newfoundland situation and how people responded. And it was very well received, and it's still very well received to this day. I think there is in about 5th or 6th or 7th printing or something. But the people that came for the musical, they did the research and went back to Toronto, and eventually we heard that there was a pilot project being done, and it was still a little bit vivid in our minds as to how the hell this thing was going to become a musical of any type, especially one that people would have the patience to sit down and watch or listen to. And but they had their ideas, and they put it together, and the pilot was well received. They took it to New York and showed it to families who had lost loved ones, and first responders who had lost buddies, and firefighters and police officers and things like that, and they received it well, and then it got picked up by a company called Junkyard Dog, picked up the rights to it, and they refined it even more, and took it to San Diego and refined it even more, and then released it on in Gander, brought it to Gander for its initial showing, and we were told to show up. And basically, that's when we found out what roles, if any, that we would be playing and how the thing was being put together. And we were obviously blown away by it all. You know, just over the top with how well we had been portrayed by this young couple who managed to put it all together and put together a message that was resonated very well with us and with all of the Newfoundlanders that saw it on those couple of days. But then we were being told it was being taken to Toronto, and Toronto's a big city, and we look at Toronto as a place without a hockey team, and stuff like that, and we kid one another about
They got
it.
further than your team.
But anyhow, you know, that's we look at Toronto as a whole different dimension than Appleton or Gander or Newfoundland, for that matter. Half a million people in Newfoundland, and you know, a borough in Toronto has 500,000 people. So I mean, and then they were taking it, and in Toronto it broke all records, and people were just bending over backwards to get tickets.
I think the big thing was that we were afraid of how everything was going to be portrayed, because again, you can't envision that they were doing a story about a tragedy, but it's not a story about a tragedy. It's a story about goodness and kindness and love and hugs and sandwiches, you know, and as one of the funny things here was, I guess everybody has macaroni in their house and everybody has hamburger meat in their house. So at the town hall, we kept getting dishes of goulash. And after it, I said we should have wrote a recipe book of 101 ways to cook goulash. Because people said, I know we're backtracking a bit, we're gone from the movie back, but the stuff that, you know, archival stuff that people got to try Jig's dinner, and they tried cod tongues, and they tried moose meat and rabbit and like every kind of food. They, you know, but then, you know, they try it and they like it, so they got to experience things. And a lot of them even said, like, they had spent weeks in France and they had spent weeks here and there, and they said, like, the 4 or 5 days that they got to spend in our town, they said, was more valuable and was a better vacation than they actually had on their vacation. So that made us feel pretty good.
I think the mere fact as well that, you know, and it can't be underestimated, the patience of the plain people under the difficult circumstances that they found themselves in. They were very, we were accommodating them, but they were also willing to be accommodated in whatever way we could. And they were very appreciative of whatever was being done for them. And I think that made it all work so much more, because I mean, it doesn't take a big lot of people to uproot the whole situation, especially when you got a school for 300 or 400 or 500 people in there. And if you've got 50 people saying, "Oh, we don't want no part of this," we have, you know. Now in the meantime, there wasn't too much choices. It was either the school gymnasium, or you were probably camping on somebody's lawn, because there was no accommodations available. And the houses that were being, you know, everyone that offered was taken up, you know, their offer for the most part was taken up immediately, so people were moving out to get space there. So that was sort of, you know, and that was a nice part to the whole thing. But I think that and of course, we were invited to Toronto for shows in Toronto. We were invited then. They took it to, I mean, in Toronto it broke records of 100-year-old records at the Royal Alexander Theatre. And tickets at the last few shows were being sold online, and scalpers were selling them for wicked prices if you could get one. And then, of course, they moved off to Broadway. And of course, you know, our thoughts were again, well, Toronto is Canada, and Canada was so friendly, and it's such a friendly country. We consider ourselves a friendly province. We consider ourselves a friendly country, an understanding country, and a country of melting pot, I guess, of different nationalities, and, you know, a welcoming country. But it was going to New York, and I mean, Broadway is Broadway, and there's hundreds of shows and hundreds of things to do. And would this show make it on Broadway? And it has made it big time on Broadway, and we were fortunate enough, you know, to be invited to Broadway for the official opening, and that was a huge milestone for us, I guess. I mean, some 17 years later now, almost 17 years later, we were getting invited to be there on Broadway, and for us at our age, especially now that, you know, we've gone through our careers, we're both retired, and to be invited to stand on the stage of Broadway and take a bow after a show to thousands of people that you've never met before, and have never a lot of them still didn't know much about Gander and about Newfoundland and about and some probably not a lot about Canada, but I mean, you know, it was quite an exceptional thing, and it was only just getting started. People kept saying it's just getting started, and to that end, it is. You know, Diane and I were with the group that were all invited to Seattle and for the opening of the national touring group that's now touring around the US and Canada, doing all the big centers and selling out every show as they go. We were fortunate enough to be invited to Portland, Oregon for Canada Day in Portland for the opening of the Come From Away show in Portland, the traveling road show, or the national touring show they call it, I guess. And
London, England.
a great, and then to get invited to London, England, where again, you know, to hop from North American continent where most of the activity was going on about 9/11 and 9/12, where Canada was such playing an active role, to move from Toronto and Broadway and the various cities around the US to move to London, Dublin first, where it was piloted, and then to London, where again the reception to the production has been unbelievable and overwhelming.
I think one of the I suppose most commonly asked questions after, like when they find out that there's people from the area, from Newfoundland in the audience, when the show is over, the people will come up and say, you know, just thank you. But they'll say, now that didn't really happen, did it? And we say, yes. Every single thing that's in that show happened. It might be half this story and half this story to make a storyline, but every bit of it is 100% true. And they're blown away. But I guess, and it's one of the very few Broadway musicals that have ever been written that are actually about a true story. So it's pretty cool.
There's not a big lot of fiction in there. There's a you know, the characters are all melded together, and the stories are moved together, and the music is for this, which is quite
it's Celtic Newfoundland music.
Quite Newfoundland culture and Newfoundland style music. You know, where it portrays, the music portrays our character as well as the words portray and the actions, and you know, and now the fact that we are going to be going to another continent. I mean, we're going to Australia, and you know, the musical is opening in Australia, and it seems, based on the information that we're hearing, that it'll probably get the same kind of reception in Australia that it's got everywhere else. And you know, there's still a movie being talked about, and the HBO documentary You Are Here, which talks about 9/11 in more detail, and then leads to Come From Away.
Everybody should see that documentary.
That is so well put together,
and it's won awards.
It's won several awards, and so has the musical. So it's so hard to believe, I suppose, that people, I guess people are looking for some good news stories. You know, there's lots of bad news on the TV, and I mean, recently and over periods of time, we've seen all those tragic events and those attacks on hotels and on churches and on people in general that are just generally out having a good time, and we're seeing all of that type of thing. You see that every day, and there's war in Syria, and there's war in other parts of the world, and there's those type of tragic stories, and there's always the natural disasters which, you know, take away so many lives and that type of thing, and infighting in countries and everything else. But when there's a positive, good news story. I think that it draws in people's, it goes to people's
It gives
thoughts.
people hope.
Gives people hope, and it thinks of
There's still
people
goodness.
at better times. And there's goodness in the world
Goodness and kindness.
wherever. I mean, and we haven't captured the corner on kindness in Newfoundland and Labrador. We did what we wanted to do, and we did what we felt we had to do at the time we did it. And we did it for the reasons that people needed some assistance. And if we had to do it tomorrow for some other reason, hopefully we'd never have to do it for the same reason. But if we had to do it for some other reason, we would do it again. And we've been used to doing it for years and for centuries for tragedies that have taken place off our coastline, and tragedies that have taken place in communities where and we're known as a giving people. Per capita in our province, we are one of the highest givers in a province where people are not all flush with cash.
Province.
We're not a wealthy province. But we're a caring and a giving province, and we did that because we felt it was the right thing to do at the time, and didn't expect anything else from it. But at this point in time, because of the exposure that we're getting, there are some nice positive things happening from it. We're seeing an uptake on our tourism industry and people coming to our province, which will help everybody, because I mean, again, that's a big part of our provincial culture. They don't all come for the weather in Newfoundland and Labrador. I mean, we have snow in many months of the year, and we have cold weather, and we have fog, and we have all of the things that a lot of other places don't have. But we don't have, we always say we're not Disneyland, we're Newfoundland. And, you know, we are laid back, hospitable type people, friendly.
Like
talk
a good
to
time.
Like a good
music.
time, like a good party, like good music, like good food, and enjoy ourselves, and you know, like to share a little bit of love and happiness with our family and friends, and you know, those people became family and friends in a very short period of time.
It's one funny little story, but it's we may not have ever ended up as part of this show, but on the 10th anniversary, I don't know if you've probably heard of Rex Murphy. Okay, Rex Murphy came down for the 10th anniversary and did his Sunday show.
His radio show.
I guess his Sunday radio show at the Arts and Culture Centre. And of course, most of the times it was, you know, planes had to land somewhere. There's no airport in Appleton. There's no airport in Glenwood. So the planes landed in Gander. So all the referrals, of course, were to Gander. But when they talk about it, they acknowledge the other towns, but it was always Gander and surrounding areas. Gander and surrounding area. So anyway, he was having this talkback show, and you know, you could ask him questions. So Mr. here gets up and it says, "So I'm Derm Flynn, mayor of and surrounding area." So David and Irene came up to him after. They said, "Oh well, we'd like to talk to the mayor of and surrounding area."
Yeah. So it's all, you know, it's so nice to have, and we're having people from all over call us, and you know, when I say call us, I mean I say in the bigger sense of the word, the other people that are that are actually portrayed in the production, and people that are not portrayed in the production, if people know that they were involved or want to talk to them as well. So you know, that's a real nice start. So you know what, it's just one of those things that. And just the fact that you are here doing your, you know, bit of research and your expose on 9/11 and come from away, and you know, and there's other people doing that and have come here. We've had people, you know, reporters from Australia and reporters from London and reporters from California and other parts of the U.S. and mainland, of course, as well. And
yes, we've gotten to know so many people and meet so many people too. In fact, like what we refer to our come from away crowd now, not just the actors, but the producers and the stage managers and the technical people. We call it our come from away family, because if something is going on with somebody, you're there, or you know, you're there for them, and and we love to see each other. I mean, we get together, it's like all home week, you know, there's hugs and kisses and what have you been at and all this kind of stuff. And you just try to stay in contact with them. So it's really been quite an experience, something I don't think we ever thought that we'd be part of.
Yeah, we even got involved in the last year because when we were meeting so many people, as Diane just mentioned, from other different places, and people were saying, we want to come to Newfoundland, we want to experience what those people experience. Now, you know, you could come to Newfoundland and check into a hotel and 3 or 4 days later check out, and you may not even meet anyone that was involved at 9/11 or 9/12, you know, just by chance you may or may not. You would more likely probably meet them if you came to Gander, or if you came to Appleton or Lewisporte or Gambo or Norris Arm or Glenwood, but you know, other places you wouldn't necessarily do that. So we decided last year, because we felt, and we were hearing that so many people were coming, we decided to set up a little operation ourselves, because we can't call it a business, we call it Meet the Flynns. So we've had people come from up on the mainland, from New York, from Toronto, from various parts of Ontario, and to come and sit down and talk to us about our experience in 9/11. Some of the stuff that's featured in the musical, some of the stuff that's totally new and probably made it on the cutting room floor or whatever of the musical. And some of the stuff never got told before. Some of the stuff you just remember in a passing thought about, oh, something funny happened, and you know, things like. I tell a story about Tom McKeon, who was Bob in the Come From Away musical, and about when he came here, he wanted to get his jeans washed, and he had no luggage. He only had a pair he had on, so I hauled out a pair of my jeans, and I think mine are 38. And Tom was probably a pretty skinny fella at the time, 28. He started putting on some weight since he got married, and now have 2 kids and all that type of stuff. So he's catching up with me. But anyhow. And I gave him a piece of rope to tie around the jeans because Diane was washing his jeans for him, and so I mean that was you know, something that, you know, right away it's sort of like a funny thing, and there was all kinds of funny stuff.
The 2 girls that that stayed in our room upstairs, I had seen them down around the town hall. They had been sitting together and talking the whole day, so I just presumed that they were friends. So come on up to the house. So I said, okay, there's your bedroom. And I came out and I closed the door. And it just hit me. I guess they're friends. So I knocked on the door. I said, I'm sorry. I said, I didn't even ask you, like, are you friends? Are you? No, they said, we never met each other before today. I said, okay, we'll make other arrangements. No, they said, that's fine. We're just happy to have a bed. So,
yeah, so there's, you know.
There's hundreds, there's thousands of stories.
I mean, I'm sure, you know, if you met, you could probably sit and talk to another 100 people that were involved and get all kinds of different little quirks and stories and funny stories and some sad stories. And, you know, I guess by way of sort of cluing up how the people were felt when they were leaving here. And I spoke with one gentleman who had a real strong Polish accent, and I saw him over at the table, and he was literally sobbing, and he was by himself, and he was sitting there, and I went over to him and I said, how are you doing? Because I thought he may have had lost a loved one in the towers or something. And I said to him, you know, he said, I'm sad. And I said, why are you so sad? He said, because you people are so good. And I said, oh, don't worry, you know, you do the same thing for us. He said, no, he said, that's my problem. He said, I live in New York. He said, I don't know my next door neighbors. He said, and if strangers came knocking on my door, he said, I would probably call the police department. He said, I wouldn't open my door and let some stranger into my house. And he said, you people are opening up your houses, you're giving us all your food, you're doing everything for us. He said, that's why I'm feeling so bad and so sad. So, you know, I mean, that was his take on how things were going. And, you know, but again, for us, it's been, you know, the tragedy is always going to be a tragedy, and it's so sad that so many beautiful people and so many young people and so many professional people and so many families were torn apart and so many people lost their lives on that tragic
and unfortunately they're still dying.
day. And people are still dying. The
Still
first
dying.
responders, who have become, some of them who have become friends of ours, are now dying because of their work on the recovery during the aftermath of 9/11 and digging out the ground zero and that type of thing, and all the stuff that the bad stuff that was in the fire piles and that type of thing, cancer that was caused by it, and that's a tragedy in itself. But you know, it's we can't forget that, and we always can hope that it will never happen again. But tragically, there's all kinds of terrible things still happening. And you know, our innocence was lost on that day when that happened. Ever since then, we have to take off our shoes at airports and go through all kinds of metal detectors and all of the you know, the issues that we have to go through to travel, and planes and boats and trains and everything else that we never had to do before. But you know, we will never forget the tragic events of 9/11. But we are. I would have to say we are blessed and honored to be recognized in such a positive way for the work that all of us did, not just us who were featured in the production, but we are just a token representation of the thousands of people that gave and came forward and volunteered and baked and cooked and supplied rooms and meals for all of the plain people, and we are so honored to have met so many nice people as a result of that, and even more honored this late 17 years later to have still be meeting people who are playing the various roles and who are so involved and who are been so affected and so educated, I suppose, to some degree, in what happened way back when we did what we did for all the right reasons, and thought it was the way that we would like to be treated, and hopefully whatever happens we will be treated the same way as those people were treated when they were here, and we're honored and very, I guess, emotionally drained in sometimes because of all of that.
Well, I think that's the day that they all left the town hall, because I mean we were so busy, you didn't really get a chance to comprehend what was going on, and I said as they were leaving the town hall, we gave them all bag lunches and a hug and all that. There was tears everywhere, but anyway, and the door closed and the buses went up the hill, and there was probably about 20 of us or so down at the town hall, and we all just kind of looked at each other. We said, what the hell just happened? What have we been doing for the last 5 days? And we sat down and we all just started crying. So it was, I guess we were just so emotionally drained by that time. That's when we got to sit down and look and say, oh my God, like this is what's happened. You know, but so I guess we've kind of getting a little reward now for, not that we wanted reward. Our park is our shining star, I guess, down there.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it was
How
busy. Okay.
Have we covered enough for you?
did you communicate with plain people? Like, not all of them spoke English, right?
No.
No, not all spoke English, but you know, some of them it was very difficult. But you know, especially where you could commute, you know, I mean, in some places they had somebody in the group would be an interpreter to speak for somebody else. But we had a couple of people. We had two gentlemen from Poland or Hungary who were going to some kind of a big symphony conference in New York, and they spoke no English whatsoever. but they would, you know, we were sign languaging.
Lots of gestures.
Talking with our hands and
or drawing.
You know, and
drawing stuff.
But that was just in the small group that we had. So I mean, can you imagine in some of the schools and stuff? But in a lot of cases, there would be somebody in the crowd, in the group that was that could communicate for someone else. You know, if they didn't know any English whatsoever.
The food, we tried to explain to them somehow what the food was, you know. Yeah,
we would get them to try a little bit, of food. If you don't like it, fine, you know, get something else. But, so there was lots of that, and
lots of sign language. Did you get to sleep in these 5 days? Like, what was it like?
No,
very little,
not really.
Very little sleep, and you know, it was
maybe an hour.
Everybody was so hyper and so on edge and upbeat and things to do, and you know.
But generally, we'd be down to the town hall probably till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you'd come home and the people were here, so we'd sitting down talking to them. But then, like, you're back down to the hall at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock to start cooking for the next day. So there wasn't a lot of sleep.
I guess it was
we're running out of adrenaline.
I guess there was one story that's attributed to us. I guess a couple of funny stories that were attributed in the Come From Away musical that were attributed to us here at the house was. One was the
grills,
the bar, and the other one was the grills. And the grill story was well, Diane and a bunch of volunteers were at the town hall getting ready for lunch, and they needed some barbecues, and so Diane called up to me and she said, we need to get some barbecues to do the barbecue for lunchtime. And I said, well, we'll go and get some barbecues. So I looked at the people that I had here. Well, there was one Israeli couple. I didn't want to take them. They were under a honeymoon, so they were here. And there was the two girls. I was going to ask one of them. And Tom was the one that had my old jeans on. So I said to Tom, who was Bob in the Come From Away musical, that come on, we're going to get some barbecue. So we jumped in my truck out there in the driveway, and we drove down the road, and I see a barbecue on my neighbor's patio. So we pull in there, and
you stayed in the truck.
they weren't home. So I say to him, I said, we're going to take the barbecue here. So I knocks on the door, no answer, and I said, we're going to take the barbecue. He says, there's nobody home. He says, you can't take the barbecue. And I said, yeah, come on, we'll take the barbecue. We put the barbecue in the back of the truck. So then we need another one, so we'd start driving up over the road. And I mean, I know everybody in Appleton pretty well. There's only 680 people in Appleton, and I know most of them. I know most of their families. But anyhow, the next place, I said to Tom, I said, you keep watching out the window, and if you see a barbecue on somebody's patio, we'll stop and take it. So he sees a barbecue on the patio, and we stop, and I knock on that door, and of course the two people that lived in that house were both working at the airport. No, I knew that they weren't home. So anyhow, we take that barbecue as well, and he says, you're taking the barbecue without having any permission. He says, if we took that barbecue in my home in New York, he said, somebody would be shot. They would shoot you for taking the barbecue off the property. So that made it into the musical, and it became a funny part in the musical. So that was one of the funny stories. The other one was of course, the whiskey, and as it turns out, there was 3 Irishmen down at the hall, and they decided to come up to my house for a shower, because even though we had already offered showers to people, so they came up for a shower, and there was somebody in the shower when they came up, and I said, well, there's somebody in the shower. While they're waiting, why don't you go downstairs? And so I said I might be able to find a drop of whiskey in the bar downstairs. So when they came down, we had a drink of whiskey, and anyhow, then they get up, and instead of going up to get the shower when the shower became available, they left. Away they went, and you know, an hour or so later, a couple of hours later, that afternoon, they came back again, and they said, we're going to have a shower now. So I said, oh yeah, no problem, the shower's vacant. But anyhow, they didn't bother to shower. They came downstairs and they had another drink of whiskey, and so then away they went. So that happened a couple of times, a couple of days. So it was sort of a bit of a inside joke that they were coming up to my house for a shower, but the only shower they had was from the inside because they never got wet on the outside. They just drank the Irish whiskey and went. And so that was, you know, and of course they were going up to the store at the highway market. There was only one little store in town, and they were going up, and the girl up the market, she gets so many newspapers every day, so they wanted to get information from newspapers and everywhere they could. So they were going up and they were putting their names in for newspapers because she would never have enough newspapers because she only probably gets 20 a day that she sells locally. But of course with the number of people, all of a sudden there was other people wanted newspapers, so they were going up and putting their names in for newspapers. And one couple from
Italy.
Italy. No, they weren't from Italy. They were Italians living in New York. But anyhow, they operated a restaurant in New York. So one of the evening meals down at the town hall, we were serving up the goulash and all of the other things we were serving up because it was always a smorgasbord of food. It was always a buffet type thing of all kinds of different food that people were bringing in. Anyhow, they went up to the store and they brought a case of wine down to the supper. So I mean, people were pretty relaxed, and we have a bar down at the hall, so we could open the bar in the night time, and people could have a beer or a drink, and made it a little bit more fun and more relaxation. When everybody, because by now they all knew that they weren't going anywhere until the word came from the U.S. that the airspace was open. So they were becoming more and more relaxed and more comfortable with us, and us comfortable with them. So it was, you know, it was sort of that type of an atmosphere that developed around the stay, and it helped things. It helped keep things more calm and keep people a bit more relaxed as they were waiting. Because I mean, everybody, like anyone else, once you are on your way home from wherever you've been, you want to get there. Or if you're going on a vacation from home and you were going to, and people from Europe were coming to New York and places like that and other parts of the US, and they just wanted to get to where they were going. I mean, and that's the normal way of people feel. I mean, you don't like to be stopped and held over for, especially when you got no luggage and no clothes and no, you know, no nothing.
Some of them went home with a better wardrobe.
I don't know about that, but anyhow, it's, you know, there's a lot of real funny stories that, you know, you sit and think about them. After a while you pick up another half dozen, and I mean, if you talk to another 50 people, I'm sure they'd tell you 50 more different stories, and there's always a sad story thrown into the mix as well. And
Dave and Irene said they had 16,000 stories.
Yeah, something like that. You know, and our good friend Beulah Cooper had, of course, the O'Rourke's, who became close friends of ours as well, and you know, that their story was so tragic, and you know, again, it goes back to the tragedy of 9/11. You know, ours is the recovery of 9/12 and the activities of 9/12 beyond. So I mean, one should never mix up one with the other, but one happened because of the other. You know, 9/11 happened. We were lucky enough to be able to take part in the 9/12 part and to do what we could to help people in need, friends in need, who became family in need to some degree. So it's all a mixture of what's become the Come From Away story and the You Are Here documentary.
Well, I guess kindness won the day.
Yes, kindness won the day, won out over the tragedy, and I think that in the world even now, where all of the tragic events are happening and the devastation and the terrorist attacks and everything are happening, it seems, I mean, despite the tragedies of those events, the communities and the places come out stronger. They seem the people, I mean, you know, people are more resolved to try to live their lives in an uninterrupted way. despite the tragedy of events. So good will always prevail over evil, anytime, any place, and we always like to think that and like to live in hope of that. And I think that's probably to some degree the story that's been told about Newfoundland and Labrador, and about our communities, and about Canada in relation to the Come Home Away story.
But weren't you afraid? I mean, US closed the airspace because they were afraid of, other terror attacks.
Oh yeah, I mean, but I don't know if we had time to think about that. Maybe afterwards we thought about it. In fact, I think probably one of the hardest times we thought about it was when they announced this Operation Yellow Ribbon that took part that day. Basically, they sent the planes to Newfoundland because if the planes landed and smashed into buildings in downtown Toronto, there'd be a lot more people killed than if the planes crashed in Newfoundland. So that's what. That's what they thought about us,
I told a story to a group in Yuma, Arizona. After we had finished Come From Away in Broadway, we went to Yuma for a couple of weeks because my brother was vacationing there or staying there for a period of time. We went there for a little bit of R&R, and I was asked to speak to a group there, and I spoke to them and I told them the story that the government decided to send all of the planes to land them in Newfoundland and on the East Coast, especially in Newfoundland and especially in Gander, because there's the skyscrapers in Gander are built on their side and they're called strip malls, and it's pretty difficult for planes to run into the sides of strip malls. There's no tall buildings in Gander.
The tallest building is 3 stories.
3 stories tall. So the chances of running into skyscrapers in Gander at the international airport in Gander were pretty slim. So and that sort of a funny gesture was somewhat the reason why, but it was also because such a sparse population that we had on the island of Newfoundland, that other than the 100,000 in St. John's, everybody else is very small communities, and we're all stretched all over the province. So yeah.
And what was an interview with David and Irene like? I was always curious about how did they interview all these people before they made the musical?
They just went around and...
They just found, wherever they could go, and people were referring people to them, and they knew of, through they knew there was people everywhere. I don't know how they managed to get, a lot from word of mouth, because we referred them to Tom in New York, because we knew of Tom's story because he stayed with us, and Mrs. Cooper referred him to Mrs. O'Rourke, obviously, because we knew that's tragic story.
I think maybe when they came here to do it, they made contact with town halls.
Yes,
and asked them if they knew of people who were involved.
Yeah. So there was lots of people.
They did hundreds of interviews.
Lots of people came forward with bits and pieces of stories, and they're all mingled in. They're all mingled in together, molded together to make one storyline in some cases, and then move on to another storyline, which may be 3 or 4 people's comments put together to make another storyline. So that's the magic of the writers. Has obviously worked.
They did a damn good job.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive, and the idea person behind it, who is again more behind the scenes, Michael Rubinoff, he was determined that there was a possible musical in what had happened, and came up with the idea of having writers research for a musical, which was piloted at Sheridan College, where Michael works, and how they put it all together with the small number of characters playing so many different roles and all that type of thing. An amazing accomplishment in itself. And David had an affiliation and a strong like for Newfoundland culture and Newfoundland music, and the musical part of it, I guess, he could bring together with all of that, coupled with our own culture and our strong musical culture that we have in this province, which is very, very strong. And I get to see just about every musical act that plays in Newfoundland that plays either bit of Irish music and that type of thing, because my son and daughter-in-law own O'Reilly's Irish Pub, which is one of the best pubs, was voted one of the best pubs in Canada, and
We get
we
lots
get
of
there
Celtic
and
music
we get to see all kinds of Celtic music, and you see strains of that music in the Come From Away musical, and the tie-ins with that, and with other ways that it's all tied together to make the story. It's pretty amazing, and every time that we see it, and we've seen it about 20, I know some of our fellow real people, we call them, not that's the right word, but have seen it 80 and 100 times, but we've seen it now about around 20 times. But it sort of takes us back to all of the musical roots of our province and the good deeds of Newfoundland and Labrador, and the hospitality that we are famous for. We're not all totally 100% hospitable people. We got our own contrary people like everyone else, but by and large we're a pretty hospitable bunch, and willing to share what we have with neighbours, and in the case of 18 years ago with the world. So that's basically how we view it. Now we look at it as sort of ironic, because neither one of us had seen musicals, I don't think, before in our lives. Maybe one or something like that, and now we go to the theatre and we watch how the different actors and the different troupes are playing the parts, and we're trying to pick out little things that one does different than the other, and that type of thing in different shows, and we become our own musical critics, I suppose, to some degree, and sort of trying to assess how it rolled out and how it came together, and how the different stories came to be, and how they got put on the stage. And it's
a good experience.
It's an interesting scenario, very very enjoyable, and a family for sure, of the whole Come From Away family.
What was your what was your favorite Come From Away experience? Like, what was the most heartwarming experience?
I'd say Gander.
Well, the show in Gander had to be such a uplifting event for us, because we didn't know what to expect. So after we saw Gander, we had more of an idea of what was coming for the rest.
Because that was our first time seeing the show. He said we didn't know what to expect, and to see that these two young writers, and along with the students at Sheridan and all that, had put all of these events together in this 90-minute production so tastefully that it just warmed the heart. And I think for the actors and for us to see the way that the 5,000 people who saw the show that day, how they, even before the first song was over, they were on their feet giving him a standing ovation. You know, I got goosebumps now thinking about it. Actually, I think the way that the Newfoundlanders accepted the way that they had put the show together, it was uplifting for us, and it was so uplifting to see and to know after that we were talking to the actors after, and they said they were there, okay, like we're not even halfway through the first song and there's tears running down our face and we've still got 90 more minutes to go. So how do we do this? So it was marvelous.
I think the other uplifting thing for me from the Come From Away thing is really the reaction of the audience, because it's a different group every night for the most part, or maybe a few repeat people in the audience, but it's a different group. But the reaction is generally always the same. Some more vocal, and I guess more energized than others, but all very energized and very responsive, very appreciative. And you know, for any of the shows that we've attended and any of the shows that our friends have attended, the response has been, the personal response to us has been unbelievable after the shows. Obviously they appreciate the show and the story and the actors, but when they found out that there's not only us but other Newfoundlanders who are not even depicted in the shows, if they find out that they're from Newfoundland, in New York or in Toronto or even in London, people are coming up in hordes and wanting to speak to them and wanting to say thank you to them just because they're from the place that we're from. So that is uplifting in itself. In the show itself, I really like, well, there's two parts, I guess. It's the part with the orcs and when she finds out that her son had passed. That's a difficult part for me personally. And the whole musical, the prayer channel of peace, that part of the music part is very, I guess it's sort of, you know, it shows we are a global world, and you know, made up of many cultures, many religions, and many everything. We're not all the same, and we're not all cookie cutter people. We're all different people with our own different ideas and beliefs and religions and politics and whatever else. So I mean that's a powerful part in the musical as well. And, you know, the other parts are always enjoyable, but those are sort of poignant parts that I sort of, when I see the shows, they hit pretty strong, hit home for me.
I think probably one of maybe the best and the worst day was maybe New York. I mean, we were all excited about, I mean, holy shit, we're going to Broadway, you know, and that was something else. And we had gone to the show that night, and I mean, we were treated like royalty, big receptions after, big reception at Gotham Hall, 1,400 invited guests, Shanniganach brought up from Newfoundland to play, and we partied, and we had a great time. But then the next day, they brought us to the 9/11
Tribute Center.
The museum first. We did the museum, and then they brought us to the Tribute Center. So we started the day out up here, so excited from the night before, and then we quickly went right down here after going to the museum and the Tribute Center. Like it was like a big crash happened, but it was.
It's all part of the whole learning situation.
It was a good day but a bad day. Yeah.
Anyhow, we're delighted to meet you and delighted to be able to tell our stories to you and to the many people I'm sure that you're going to will see this. If you get an opportunity, wherever you are, go see Come From Away. And if you can, or if you do, or if you don't, either way, come to Newfoundland and Labrador and visit us, find out about a place that you probably never knew about, and that is a real place with real people that are friendly and hospitable and welcoming to the world. So come see us. It may be hard to get here, but you'll make it.
They should see the documentary too.
And see the documentary, of course.
Or you Are Here, the Comfortable Way story.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is the end of the interview.